It really comes down to what you want to do out of your vehicle and just take it from there. Well, hello my friends, Kevin here, and thanks for watching this video in our Bottom Line series where we focus on everything about custom lower trucks. Before we get started, I want to ask everybody to like this video and also to subscribe to this channel as it helps us produce more videos in the future. Well, with that out of the way, let's continue on with our video, which is a bit of a throwback to one that I produced last year called Air Ride versus Hydraulics, where I wanted to compare two trucks that have these different suspension systems. And you can check that out if you haven't seen it. I'll drop the link to that in the description below. But basically, I had my truck that had airbags, and I wanted to find another truck that had hydraulics so I can compare the two. And I made a call out in the truck community to find another truck, and I couldn't find one that had hydraulics and that was running and driving that was able to make it to a shoot. So I ended up shooting with my buddy Saul Vargas, who has a lowrider, which is great to show hydraulics in that element, but it just was not an apples to apples comparison. Luckily, my buddy Brian Hill got his OBS truck repaired, and it's sitting behind me, and this thing was built by Chassis by Aaron Eha, and it's pretty much the top of the mark when it comes to show trucks with hydraulics, as it won Best of Show at Lone Star Throwdown in 2015. Well, like I said, I have Brian here. He was able to come out to the shoot. Thanks for coming out, man. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your truck, as it's a bit different from pretty much everything else in the scene.
All right, yeah, it's an 89 OBS on hydraulics, full frame, 24s, 26s, chopped, LS3. It's a wild custom.
Now, I'm quite familiar with Air Ride. We've done a number of videos about it, talking about everything top to bottom about the subject. And I know that when you install airbags on a truck, attaching them to a factory chassis is a bit difficult with space and stuff like that. Now, are hydraulics a little bit easier in that because the cylinder or ram is a little bit slim?
Yeah, I think that's my experience. With airbags, you have to kind of cut the frame pockets in the front, make a couple modifications. With hydraulics, you don't. You basically just drill a small hole in the frame and attach it to the spring, and you don't really have to worry about rubbing or anything like that. It all just sort of sits there.
Yeah, which is a big issue with Air Ride. When you got your airbags, they do take up a lot of room. You can't get them around heat. Any rubbing issues, you can have a puncture and you'll be out of air and you'll be dead in the water wherever you're at, which is, you know, not a good situation. But now I know that there are a number of systems out there for trucks to install airbags, suspension systems that are pretty much bolt-on. Don't take too much brain work to put them in. Pretty much anybody can install them in the ease of their own garage. But how is that for hydraulics? I don't think there's any systems out there, suspension systems for trucks, right? No,
I don't think the market has said that they want that exactly right now. I think everybody's just sort of gone towards airbags. But I do, again, it's a little bit easier to install hydraulics. You know, in the 80s and 90s, people were doing that all day and all night. So it's kind of been done. But I think if people started installing hydraulics, there would be, you know, people would pick up on it because it is pretty easy.
Yeah, I think that just goes along with the popularity and just a lot of truck guys migrated to Air Ride and that's where they went. But how about like mounting the cylinders themselves? Is that pretty easy? I mean, that's got to take some fabrication, right?
Yeah, a little bit, especially in the rear. You know, you're going to want something to hold the springs. You're going to want to put coil springs in. You're not going to use the leaf. So there is some modification in the rear that you'd have to do.
Gotcha. Now let's talk about components. I know with Air Ride, there's a lot of components. You got your tanks, you got compressors, you got your lines, you got gauges, all that stuff. Now, is there more involved with hydraulics, or is it about the same amount of space it's all going to take?
Space, absolutely. It's probably the same, depending on how many batteries you run.
Gotcha. And on the subject of batteries, I mean, I've seen lowriders with trunks full of batteries. So what's the deal with that? How many batteries are you running?
I run 3, but I run a 24 volt system. So what that means is the motor is designed to be a 12 volt motor. I'm basically feeding double that. So however many volts you have, the quicker it's going to hop. So if you have a 96 volt system with a bunch of batteries, you're a hopper. You're hopping up and down. I'm not hopping in this, obviously, so up and down is just fine for me.
Gotcha. Well, and that's another subject we covered in a video called Dead Trends. We'll drop the link to that in the description below. But basically, hopping and things like that, like dragging with trucks, are just no longer a thing. I think people appreciate their vehicles too much where they're not doing that sort of thing. And I think along with that too, I mean, you know, there comes damage when you're doing that sort of stuff. But if you're installing a system like that, you have to reinforce that a little bit more because you can get stress and all that stuff, right?
If you're hopping, for sure, but again, I'm not hopping. I think the majority of your viewers are not hopping.
Yeah.
So just like with airbags, you don't really need to reinforce the frame that way. Same with hydraulics.
Yeah, you might find some issues where you will. I know I did with my S10. I think when we put the shocks on, I ended up getting a crack in my frame. So there can be instances you're going to get probably a little more stress than you would from your factory suspension system. Just things to keep your eye out for, but I don't think it's going to be anything extravagant if you're installing these systems, either way. All right, well, another thing I want to ask you is about lines in running your system. I know with Air Ride we use, or a lot of guys use plastic line, which is basically DOT brake line. So it's easily available. It withstands the 200 PSI pressure that I was talking about. But there's other ways to go. I know my truck had hard lines in it. I had copper hard lines. That way there was no flexing, because with plastic lines, if you're mounting it in your chassis somewhere, something could move against it, so you can get wear and tear. Heat is also a problem, so you can break your air line easily if you're using that plastic line, and you're gonna be in a bad situation. You're not gonna have any air. So we hardlined my truck so it wouldn't be an issue. We used copper at the time. I think it was a little bit cheaper, but a lot of people use stainless steel and bend that tubing and use it. But what do guys typically use in hydraulic systems?
They can get hoses in the same place they would from where you're getting your air lines at. If you've seen a dump truck, you've seen a similar style hydraulic line. I have all hard lines, stainless steel hard lines on my truck, just because that's the kind of build it is. There are some flexible hoses as well where parts move. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, so these hoses are just like industrial grade rubber hoses. What about stainless steel braided lines, using those?
I have been told that is not recommended, just because of the PSI involved. They can pop out. They're more for vanity purposes, so you would want to, if you're absolutely set on using them, you'd want to use them as a return line. Gotcha.
So you've got to have some purpose, obviously. You've got these beefed up lines. What kind of PSI are we talking about here?
3,000.
Oh, geez, that's just crazy. That's like Superman's veins or something. We're talking about 200 PSI. This guy's talking about 3,000. Absolutely crazy to run these things. So speaking of leaks and that pressure, it's kind of difficult on Air Ride to find a leak. Easy if you know what you're doing. Basically, you get a squirt bottle, put some water in there, put some soap in there, shampoo, something like that. You squirt it all over your entire system, and you'll see bubbles, so that's how you'll find a leak. It's a bit easier to find leaks on hydraulics, right?
Yeah, just follow the puddle.
Now, I do think there's a catch here, because it's a little bit easier to find those leaks on hydraulics, but at the same time, it's messy, right?
Absolutely, yeah. My mom's driveway when I was a kid, they were not looking so good.
Now, another question when we're talking about lines, what type of fluid are you running? Are you running motor oil like I've heard before, or is it something different you're using?
Yeah, just standard motor oil. There have been advancements that I'm not basically familiar with right now. I know my builder is probably kicking me for not saying the right thing, but if you're going to do hydraulics, you can use normal motor oil. Just use motor oil with no detergent in it, because it'll cause corrosion.
Gotcha. And that's another subject about Air Ride is it's easy to get corrosion in your system. You've got compressors that have heat, compress air, and there's going to be condensation, and you can get water in that system. It goes through the system, it sits there, it creates corrosion, rust, all that stuff, and it makes parts go bad, valves, everything can go bad with your system. We install what we call water traps to combat that. Also, it's recommended to drain your entire system daily so you don't have any of that condensation, any water. But is there any corrosion with hydraulics? I figured like the fluids, keeping everything lubricated, all that stuff, and everything should be good for a while, right?
Yeah, it's pretty good. You just want to make sure that you check the system for any metal shavings or anything like that. Because of the way hydraulics works, there's two gears that sort of mesh together. They can cause some metal on metal contact. So you just want to check to make sure you don't have any of that in your system, otherwise you're good.
Gotcha. So it's a little bit like an oil change of doing that. But how often do you recommend, are you supposed to be changing your fluid?
It depends on how you see your fluid. 6 months, I'd say, is probably good, just to get an overall check. You want to check your seals on your cylinders as well.
Now, while we're on the subject of maintenance, I want to talk about the electrical system and charging that. I know with my truck, I would have it sitting on the ground in my garage for a period of time. I think it would just ground out and if I didn't keep it on a charger, it would be dead when I went to go start it. You know, immediately all the air is out of it, so it's want to turn on the compressors, all that stuff. I had a switch on it to prevent the compressors from coming on. The garage is next to my bedroom, so I didn't want to hear that in the middle of the night. So once the truck's off, everything's off. But I would throw it on a charger immediately when I got home, and I knew it was going to sit for a while, at least a day, because you know, I'd probably forget if I didn't put it on immediately. Is that the situation with your truck and hydraulics? Do you want to put on a charger after you use it, or can you go a while without charging it?
I mean, you can go a while. That's actually why I couldn't be in the last video because my truck was dead. So you want to make sure you keep maintained and, you know, keep everything up to charge. Hydraulics do require charging as well, so you're already there, so you might as well just do it.
So yeah, but how long could you go if you didn't? I mean, do you think if you didn't charge it?
It really depends on the system, how many volts you're using, how often you hit the switches. I've heard of, you know, imports that have hydraulics going 6 months on a single charge with normal daily driving. So hydraulics are pretty robust.
Next thing I want to talk about is gauging your height of your suspension when you're in the truck. I know with AirRide, it's super easy. There's a number of products out there, as simply as installing an air gauge in your system. You run a line and you can tell what pressure it's at and tell how high it is. I know in my truck, I had an electrical system. I had electric sensors, ran a wire to an electric gauge on my dash. But there are also some leveling systems out there that basically you set them up, you press a button, and you're good to go. You know where your height's at. How is it with hydraulics?
Hydraulics are a little bit more old school. I tried to actually have a digital ride height management system sort of hacked together for mine. Worked for a little bit, but it was just a hack system.
So basically, you're hitting switches and hoping and praying that you're at your right height, correct?
Now I've been able to design a system using lasers to gauge my height, but I realize that's not for everybody.
Yeah, that's probably pretty expensive, right? And kind of complicated to set up?
I'd say it's about the same price as a normal digital height system, but it was complicated to set up, yes.
Gotcha. Well, it is a good idea to know where you're at height-wise, because I will tell you that it's good for tire wear. You want to set up your truck at a certain ride height, get it aligned. Otherwise, you're going to wear through your tires pretty fast, and that's not a good situation. So it's key to find out where your height is on an adjustable system. If you're driving your vehicle for distances, that will be an issue. Now, these systems are quite different. I want to find out from you, what do you think hydraulics with performance? Does it hold down to big power?
Yeah, I don't think that would be an issue at all.
Now, what engine do you have on here, and how much horsepower do you have?
I have an LS3 stock, and it's probably about 450.
Oh yeah, that's quite a number of horsepower there. But so when you get on it, with this truck having that suspension, is there any like wheel hop or anything like that, or is it just go?
Yeah, I mean, it's a cantilever on coilovers, so the coilovers are just normal suspension, and it picks up, shreds those 26s. Yeah,
and we know coilovers are good for suspension systems. Now that is a big talking point for me. I know that AirRide is so soft that it doesn't handle big power. I've seen it a number of times where people have big V8s that are supercharged. They try to get on it and they're gonna get wheel hop because that suspension is so soft. And I believe hydraulics are a little bit better in that. There was even a company called JRI Shocks that basically had a coilover with a hydraulic inside. And these were so good that I know of a truck called Orange Rush that was competitive. It had those on it. It was very good at autocross. So as far as performance, I think that's a win for hydraulics. I think you can, if you're wanting to lay down some power, that's a good direction to go. But on that note, I want to talk about towing. What do you think about, you know, I've seen it a couple times. It's not often that we have a bigger truck, maybe a dually. It's set up to tow with AirRide, and it's got a 3-car hauler behind it. Do you think you could do that with hydraulics?
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that at all. Like I said, hydraulics are at 3,000 PSI. I know that some hydraulic systems can go up to 10,000. And you see them on dump trucks, so, you know, obviously it's going to do the work.
Industrial strength. I think you're not going to go wrong there. I think the only problem is just, you know, figuring out a suspension system that's going to be nice and smooth like you've done with your truck.
Absolutely.
Well, I've got the biggest question of all about this video is ride quality. I know when I rode in my buddy Saul's lowrider, it was a bit bouncy, but that's just how those cars are. He told me it was more about cruising, driving long distances isn't a thing with lowriders. But how about your truck? How's the ride quality?
The way the system is designed, I've put in places where I can adjust it like quite a bit. And the thing about hydraulics is I think air people are used to air being compressible. Hydraulics are not compressible, so they're fixed at one point and that's it. Either they're in or they're out or whatever. Mine is a cantilever over coilovers, so I can change the shock adjustment, I can change the coil spring rate by swapping out the springs, and I can add accumulators to the system.
Now, I've heard about accumulators. What are these things?
They're basically a nitrogen charged bladder that lets the uncompressible oil into the bladder, and the nitrogen compresses like an airbag would. So it's like basically adding an airbag to your system.
Gotcha, and that's where you can get the that little bit of give, I guess, for your suspension and all that. I like that you've got the coilovers, you can tune that and everything. So I'm curious, can we go for a ride? I want to check it out. I want to see for myself and get my own verdict.
That's why I'm here, I had to prove myself.
All right, man, sounds great.
Cool.
Oh my, that was absolutely amazing. Got to thank Brian for bringing his truck to the shoot and also giving me a ride along. Kudos to the team that built this truck as well, because it's done very nice. And to give you guys a little bit of feedback on the ride itself, I can tell you it was a bit harsh, but it wasn't as bad as some static drop vehicles I've been in. Those can be pretty bad. Sometimes you hit a bump and it feels like the whole vehicle is going to fall apart. That wasn't the case with Brian's truck. And I will tell you that air ride I do think is a bit softer, but that's not necessarily the determining factor if you're looking at these systems for your vehicle. It's just case by case and what you want to do with your truck. Well, my friends, that just about does it for this video, and it's time for me to sign off. Like always, I want to ask you guys to like this video as it helps us produce more videos in the future. And I'm sure you guys have a lot to say about air ride versus hydraulics. You had a lot of comments last time, so if you have any thoughts about this video, drop that stuff in the comments section below. Also, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future video, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks for watching Driving Line. If you guys like this video, consider subscribing to our channel so you'll never miss any of the content we create here. Whether you're into trucks, Jeeps, imports, domestic vehicles, or anything in between, we are here to fuel your passion. So hit that subscribe button and we'll see you guys next time.